Never trust the obscene master. And if you're wondering who is an obscene master, here's a simple test. An obscene master is somebody where if you imitated them, if you lived like them even for a day, you would likely ruin your life. You would lose your job, you would alienate family and friends. Think about, for example, the infamous Roman salute that Elon performed at the Trump rally. If you were to do this yourself, it would likely have very dire consequences. And yet the obscene master relishes, takes delight in doing the unthinkable and saying that which couldn't be said. In this sense, it's important to note that the obscene master is a concept from Slavoj Žižek, and it's a concept that he takes from Lacanian psychoanalysis. Lacan argued that the obscene is that which undermines, or at least appears to undermine, the existing symbolic order and the status quo. And we can see an inversion of sorts, right? In the 60s and 70s, obscenity was a way of being rebellious. Today, the status quo is obscene. Leaders try to outcompete each other in vulgarities and obscene declarations. And it takes place against the backdrop of the rise of the internet. Online, the algorithms support that which gets attention. And attention is often something that you get by being vulgar and obscene. And so the more vulgar you are, the faster you race to the bottom, the more power and attention you acquire. And one of the important things about the obscene master is that the obscene master isn't a pseudo-master, which is to say the pseudo-master tells you how to live, gives you rules for life, as I put in my previous video. But the obscene master would never tell you how to live. In fact, the obscene master wants you to enjoy, wants you to sit back, kick back, grab popcorn, and enjoy the chaos and destruction that ensues. In fact, the obscene master always tacitly encourages you to enjoy watching other people squirm as they break through the existing social mores and norms. But in this sense, the obscene master is always a pseudo-revolutionary. Everything has to change in order for everything to remain the same. They stage a return to a supposed greatness. They are obscene patriots in this sense. They are doing it for the nation. They are essentially trolling for the country. And it's important to note here that the rise of the obscene master is also a symptom, by which I mean that the obscene master is a symptom of the moral high ground that was inhabited by the liberal, progressive, democratic, social and political order. For example, the idea that when you fly, you should pay extra to offset your carbon emissions or buy organic coffee at Starbucks, etc. The idea that you could have your cake and eat it too, that guilt was a fundamental signal of social status, that the more successful you were, the more guilty you were supposed to feel about it, etc. Against this, which for Lacan would have been a form of surplus enjoyment, you enjoy your own guilt. Against this political correctness, we have the return to, if you will, libidinal abundance, which is a fancy way of saying that the obscene master promises his audience that it's okay to enjoy. It's okay to relish being, in this case, American. It's okay to be someone who is proud of their country, etc. The obscene master is always telling their audience, it's okay to do what you want to do. You have a license to enjoy. He's a figure of jouissance in this sense. And Slavoj Žižek said that he was once approached by a publisher who said, could you please write a book psychoanalyzing Trump? And Žižek says that this was a total idiocy. He said, if I was going to write a book, it was to psychoanalyze the left, like how we got here. There's no point trying to pathologize the obscene master. His very performance is meant to signal his power and the way that he can get away with things. Instead, what we have to think about critically is how we got here, the contradictions and historical constellations that created this very moment in which the obscene masters are the ones who are in power. And once again, it's important to note here that the obscenity is a performance. It's a performance meant for personal enrichment. The obscene master secretly simply wants to become more powerful and more wealthy, and opportunistically stages this orgy of excess so as to distract people and keep them engaged and furious and entertained, or perhaps even furiously entertained. Now, Slavoj Žižek said that therefore, if you want to resist the obscene master, you can't simply play by his rules. You can't try to out-obscene the obscene master. In fact, it's kind of funny when you look at Republican leaders who try to act like Trump to be more popular, and it almost always backfires. The whole point of the Obscene Master is that he occupies this very lonesome territory in which only he can act in this way. He creates his own rules, his own reality. He essentially distorts what is possible. Instead, Žižek argues, and he also cautions, we can't also go high. So we can't go equally low, but we also can't go high. The infamous Michelle Obama statement that when they go low, we go high, doesn't work, because everybody knows at this point that the supposed moral high ground, the figure of authority, was always a liberal democratic illusion, which Žižek calls the democratic illusion, the process by which we couldn't actually fundamentally vote on the things that mattered most in our society. We were simply supposed to tacitly endorse the existing status quo as the supposed pinnacle of justice and order, the post-ideological, post-political, consensus-based, technocratic, liberal, democratic elite that outsourced decision-making to consultants around the world and that was afraid of any form of politics that betrayed any kind of principle or ideological position. Which is to say, the Obscene Master is a symptom of this very disavowal of ideology within post-politics. And post-politics is an academic term, but what it really means is that after the 1980s, the idea was that the classic power balance, or if you will, ideological battle between the Soviet Union and the West had been decisively won by the West, that capitalism had emerged as the inherent victor, and that therefore politics was something retrograde, that we should simply have a state that guaranteed the smooth and efficient functioning of capitalism and the participation within the consumer society that was enabled by globalization, and that if we could do so, we would all be happier and more successful. And yet, this did not turn out to be true. Inequality increased and deepened. People felt more disaffected, more alienated, more depressed than ever before. Against this, the Obscene Master promises and posits a supposed return to meaning, in which politics means something, again, in which politicians can say things without having to think about how people are going to react to it. They don't have to self-censor and filter. The Obscene Master stages a kind of rebellion of excessive truth-speaking. And yet, of course, nothing could be less true. The Obscene Master is simply working for himself. He's opportunistically exploiting people's desire for change in order to enrich himself. And so never trust an Obscene Master. An Obscene Master differs from the Pseudo-Master. A Pseudo-Master tells you how to live. An Obscene Master will always act in a way that you could never emulate. They essentially encourage you to enjoy watching them as they dismantle and destroy everything. It's a kind of nihilistic excess, but it's also a pseudo-revolution. Against this, we have the Authentic Master. And Žižek argues that the Authentic Master is someone who genuinely has political principles and is willing to go all the way for them. I'm a little bit biased here. I'm not a Bernie bro, but I actually think that Bernie is an example of an authentic master in politics. A consistent message, a consistent ideological platform that he has been holding true to for decades now. He's not saying what he thinks people want to hear. He's simply articulating a central message, which is about the danger to democracy presented by corporate greed and oligarchy. And Žižek says that this, perhaps, is a form of authentic masterdom. When you have a very specific political principle that is important to you, that you are willing to articulate, and that across time you make a structural argument, and by structural I mean that you are not pointing towards what is in the headlines, which Bernie never tries to do, but instead you simply go back and say, I want to support my constituents, and the only way to do so is to prevent corporate overtake of democracy. Here we have the Authentic Master. The Authentic Master who essentially says, let's not get distracted by the fighting, by the vulgarity, by the obscenity. And there is a kind of dignity in this stance. The Authentic Master is dignified, is a figure of quote-unquote authority precisely because he isn't telling you how to live. He's not presenting himself as a savior. He's not presenting himself as an obscene master. The true master speaks with the calm authority that derives from the convictions that he holds, from his principles, as it were. This is the master figure who I wouldn't say you should trust because he will never ask you to trust him. Hence, I think why the Bernie meme that went viral was the one where he said, I am asking you once again for your support, right? The very idea that that the master would have to ask you for your support in this sense is not just humble, but also almost an undermining of the very figure of the master. And so don't trust the pseudo-master, don't trust the obscene master, but try to be an authentic master in your own life. Try to have the courage of your convictions and to remain true to them, to remain humble, to remain strong, to remain principled, and unwaveringly critical. That is an authentic master.